Okay, delighted to be here for Club Talk Football. I'm Shane Stapleton. I'm with Paul Fitzpatrick of the Anglo Celt and Phil Lanigan of the Irish Daily Mail. How are you doing, men?
Not too bad, Shane.
Good. First things first, a tweet that's just come out this morning from East Belfast GAA. Now, it's a club that's only just been formed. The club wishes to advise members of an incident that occurred during training last night, which was Wednesday. It is the club's understanding that during the course of training, the police received a call that a package had been left somewhere in the vicinity of the playing fields upon which our members were training, which is crazy. On the advice of the PSNI, once a live situation was identified, the police and the club worked quickly to make people safe and helped them disperse from the area calmly and efficiently. The club expressed its thanks to both the PSNI and to our playing members who behaved impeccably during the situation. The creation and maintenance of a safe environment for sport to be played by all and the safety of our members whilst playing remains a priority for us all. The club intends to continue work with the police, the community in East Belfast and public at large, whose support we have enjoyed on a daily basis, to ensure the continued safety and enjoyment of our members and patrons. Our doors remain open to all. The matter has been passed on to the PSNI. Phil, in this day and age, it's shocking that something like that is happening.
It is. I would say it's incredible, really, but just the sense of timing, given the legacy of John Hume and all that we've read about, and the reaction, obviously, to his passing, how he brought communities together, and all the good work that had gone into uniting different communities. And here we are, just after the funeral and after all the good words about his legacy, about a club that has been set up to basically bring communities together, that's cross community, that is trying to generate kind of positive publicity about where the GAA can go in the future. And again, we've seen what the GAA are doing this week. They're launching different diversity things about inclusion. Their whole statement recently is about being inclusive. And here we go. That again, it's like a throwback to another time, unfortunately.
Paul, just to jump onto club football as well, and if you want to make a comment on that, please do. But
yeah, just to make one comment on that, Shane. My granduncle Matt Fitzpatrick, who was a GAA reporter, passed away about 7 or 8 years ago. But he was from Fermanagh originally, and he moved to Belfast for work, and he was one of the founding members of the Carryduff Club, which produced some great players like Greg Blaney and all over the decades. But he always used to tell me a story about when, at the time where Carryduff is, like in South Belfast, would have been predominantly unionist area. There was no traditional GAA clubs. And the evening before their first match, great excitement in the club. They had the pitch lined out, everything else. And he went down on the Saturday evening to have a look to make sure everything was in order. And when he got down, there was broken glass all over the pitch where some sort of vigilantes had come in and obviously didn't want the club in the area. So it's so sad to see that, like as Phil says, in the week of John Hume's passing, it's so sad to see that all these decades on that we haven't really moved on from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to move on to the football then, I know you were saying, Phil, that you were watching your young lad play football last night, and the thing that you came away from it was thinking about the attack and mark and how it doesn't work. Now, not to get too bogged down in the rules, but it is here now, and how disastrous is it?
Look, kind of written about this. An abomination doesn't do it justice to personally. Look, and last night the lads were playing first round of minor championship. He was playing with the B team now, and they had a really good game. And it was just a different stage. The opposition full forward, won a ball, whistle blows, and as every coach tells the kids and anybody, play to the whistle. So when the whistle sounds, instinctively people stop. The guy who caught the ball stopped. And then I think it was their kind of half motion to put up his hand because the ref kind of looked at him. Everybody else stopped. There was the game literally came to a standstill. Then realised that this attack and mark is a thing again. Played on. So there's just so many elements that are counterintuitive from a coaching point of view, from a natural player's instinct point of view, from a defender's point of view. When you hear a whistle, even from an attacker point of view, everybody kind of, your natural is to stop. And just again, one of the other lads made a catch defensively and put his hand up in the air, not realising that the ball hadn't come from outside the 45. And again, when you're playing on club pitches where there might be markings, there might not be markings. The very first matches that I saw, and the lads playing the Spring League had no pitch markings, part of the goal kicking thing. So, the football was being played was great, but it was just a reminder that everybody was delighted to see the games back. But come the business end, I think the mark is one of these things, and you've mentioned water breaks. I think already, Shane, is disrupting the flow, but I think the attacking mark, as teams actually realise its capacity and how to use it, will become more of an important feature of a game. And to me, the more important it gets, the more disastrous it's going to be.
What do you think, Paul? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that actually. Yeah, it doesn't make for a great debate, but I do agree with it. I was at a championship match last night in Mulla in Cavan between Castlerahan and Shercock, and it's funny that obviously teams aren't using the dressing rooms, so if you're standing in the right place along the fence, you can actually eavesdrop on the team talk. Now, I was doing that accidentally. I didn't realise. I felt like moving because I was afraid. I was getting a bit self-conscious. But I did hear players from one of the teams. One of the last things that they were saying, I think, was the captain was saying a few words before they took their positions, and he kept reminding fellas, "Don't forget, put your hand up." And I just thought to myself, this is mad. That players have to be reminded of the rules of the game. Fellas that are playing football all their lives. And then when the game started, of course, it was tough for referees. The referee made a couple of mistakes. Players made a couple of mistakes. At one stage, a player stopped. He didn't put his hand up, and he forgot to put his hand up, and he stopped after winning the mark. And waited, and the referee came over and threw the ball up then because he hadn't put his hand up. The referee, that was right in front of where I was standing, and I could hear the referee saying to him, "Look, I'm sorry, but you didn't put your hand up." And your man was like, "I didn't know I had to." So, I mean, it's a bit farcical. This is senior championship, you know. We're not talking about a challenge match here. And the other one as well that was on show last night was the rule about the ball going back to the goalkeeper. Where you can't give it back to the goalkeeper after a kick out, and that happened once in the game last night, and the referee didn't cop it. And the mentors, I was standing beside one, there was the Castlerahan dugout, and their mentors were absolutely mad and were shouting at the linesman, and the linesman did highlight it to the referee, and you could see by his body language he was saying, "Oh Jesus, I just forgot." So it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure on referees as well, because it's a very hard job anyway.
Can I just jump onto the Monaghan Championship? So this weekend, Scottstown are against Carrick and Cross. That's one big game. But Clontibbert are against Maher-Clune, and I think most people will straight away think of Conor McManus when they think of Clontibbert. But Maher-Clune, Tommy Freeman country. And Phil, you had an experience of Maher-Clune in the not too recent past, and even togged out alongside the great Tommy Freeman.
Well, on the same pitch briefly, and I'd say he doesn't remember my contribution. But yeah, it was just obviously everybody knows the Maher-Clune story and the sinkhole and how that kind of really, devastated the club. But what happened, it was a mad story. Just one of the kids in our club in Rathogue then, to be a bit of a connection at times with various Monaghan clubs, but decided to write a letter saying he wanted to do something to help the club. And this 7-year-old was Victor Clark, and it just got picked up in the Chronicle, and the club appreciated the gesture. So what they ended up doing was playing a challenge match, a charity challenge match to fundraise for Maher-Clune. They couldn't obviously, pitches and nowhere to train, and they played an under 7s challenge, and after that they played an over 35s challenge, and that they were looking for various able-bodied and not so able-bodied, but the Freemans were just like Tommy was playing and Damien was playing, and in a match that was very much in the charity mould and exhibition and you'll score, we'll score. But every now and again, the two boys would say, "Okay, let's play a bit of football," and they were just class. You could see it straight away, and that was, I think, towards the tail end of 2018. And I believe Paul probably tells the lads, Tommy's still leading the charge, I believe.
Yeah, Tommy is still the go-to forward for Maher-Clune. Like, he did actually sort of retire a couple of years ago, and then he came back and rolled back the years last year. And Damien, obviously Damien's retired, but as you said, Phil, people probably outside the county mightn't be aware of Damien Freeman. He hadn't as high a profile as Tommy, but he was a brilliant player. Maher-Clune are actually a brilliant club, because if you look back through the history books in Monaghan, really the senior championship was dominated by 4 clubs, which was Clontibbert, Scottstown, Ballybay and Castleblaney. And they basically carved it up among themselves for 70 or 80 years. And then Maher-Clune were the first to come in and break that, which was incredible what they did back in the noughties. They played Clontibbert in several finals. Actually, Tommy Freeman once missed a penalty in injury time when they were 2 points down to win it for them. But absolutely heartbreaking, but I think they'll forgive them for that one. But Maher-Clune are an amazing club, but they're going to be up against Clontibbert. The only thing that probably is going for them is Clontibbert are still very reliant on Conor McManus, and they're very reliant on their midfield to get ball into McManus. But Gavin Dugan's there in midfield for Maher-Clune. He matches up very well with the Clontibbert midfield. Plus, Maher-Clune have been playing matches in Inniskeen when their pitch is out of action. but this game is going to be in Clontibret, which you would say home advantage is a huge thing for Clontibret. But in actual fact, Inniskeen's a very big field, and that doesn't suit the Mahercloon, the way Mahercloon will be looking to play this game against Clontibret. They're going to be looking to obviously
just on that, what we were talking about, it'd be interesting. Someone like Conor McManus, I would have thought, would be sitting there going, this attacking mark is potentially the saviour. For someone like him, is generally double marked, the rigours of Ulster football, where they know him inside out. I would have thought for someone like him who can score from anywhere inside the 45 if he gets a free kick. So it'd be very interesting to see how players like that adapt, and particularly in club championships. I'm sure the rest of his teammates will be told, lads, 20 metre little pass, hit Conor wherever he is, potentially a score. So it'd be very interesting to see how quickly clubs and then the counties, who are always generally a step ahead, even mentally, just adapt to it.
Yeah, absolutely. If they had Vinnie Corey as well, it'd be an even bigger plus on the inside line. But I don't think Vinnie played the last day, but I'm sure he'll feature at some stage.
So just in a general sense, who would you be fancying for Monaghan this year?
I kind of fancy Ballybay. They've been close for the last few years. There was one game where they were 8 points up going into injury time against Scottstown and conceded 2-2 and lost the replay. They've actually been very close. They've won the league once or twice as well. I have a feeling that the Scottstown are probably still the best team in Monaghan. They won 4 out of 5 there coming into last year. Clontibret sort of pinched that one last year. But I have a feeling that Ballybay might be there. They've still got Paul Finlay. They've got Christy McGuinness in the corner. They've got Kieran Galligan, who used to play with Cavan, who played really well in midfield the last day. Michael Hannon, that used to play with Cavan, is playing with them as well. So they're strong. Ballybay are strong. They have a good management this year, so I kind of fancy them. But again, it's generally between those top. In Monaghan, you've about 3 or 4 teams, and it's very rare. You'd have Carrick, through Mahercloon, teams like that coming trying to push through. But generally, it's still the top 3 or 4, with Blaney having sort of fallen off the pace for the last decade or so.
Mahercloon, they got to the All-Ireland Intermediate final, which they lost to Uachtarard earlier in the year, but it's going to be a fair step up against Clontibret. Just to jump over to Mayo Championship, so there's plenty of games going on there this weekend, and you can see them all listed on the site. But one that stood out to me was Castlebar Mitchells against Brafey, because Brafey are possibly knocked out. Well, they are going to get knocked out with a game to go if they lose this, because they've already lost to Westport, and Westport are against Charlestown this weekend. But Brafey just seem like one of these clubs, Aidan O'Shea, Seamus O'Shea, Rob Henley, they've plenty of quality in the team, Phil. They just can't seem to get over the line. No senior county titles, and there's kind of a bridesmaid tag hanging over them at this point.
Yeah, just looking at the kind of some of the reports and photographs from last weekend, I think there was a great shot of Lee Keegan, wasn't there, and Aidan O'Shea, just kind of having a laugh as they obviously knocked lumps out of each other at different stages. And I saw as well James Horn and Kieran MacDonald sitting on a bank, MacDonald with the beanie hat on, wasn't it? So kind of keeping a close eye on what's going on. So
well, actually MacDonald had taken about 6 sessions with Brafey earlier in the year, I think.
Okay, right. So these are, like say about Brafey, I think there's a bigger picture all the time with each of these matches, where they're almost kind of a form guide for any of the county managers for county, if we're going to get to that point, to see how all the main men are. Like even with Aidan O'Shea, like our Mayo are the key men, like Keegan, who's been struggling the last couple of years, maybe with injury. Aidan O'Shea, are they going to be in peak form, come October, all going well? So no, I think there's huge potential there, but like you say, this could be the year. I would have thought with such disruption that might throw up results maybe out of character, because if teams have had all sorts of disruptive build-ups to it, you'd think that maybe there'd be a few more shocks. So if you're a club like Brafey, maybe you'd say this is the year to kind of come in and just win one.
I'll throw this at you, Paul. Can there be too many current TDs, playing championship football at the weekend? Alan Dillon did so for Ballintubber last weekend coming on.
I don't know. There was a famous story about John Wilson told a story about, I think it was Jack Lynch when he was playing for Cork, and he won a couple of balls. He was marking some absolute tug, and your man told him if you win one more ball, there's going to be a by-election. So maybe Dylan might have a by-election if he's not careful.
Just a quick run through a couple of the other games in Mayo. So Ballintubber against Moy Davids. Now Killian O'Connor looks like he's going to be suspended after a red last weekend, but Ballintubber will still be fancied there and possibly fancied to win it outright. Westport against Charlestown, as I said. So Westport beat Brafey, and I was talking to Colm Gannon, I should say, who works for the Mayo Advertiser, and he was talking about how Westport had won all before them at minor and under 21 in recent years. And he said a notable feature of that game last week against Brafey was Kevin Keane, who I think people would remember Kevin Keane even, who played full back in the 2012 All-Ireland final against Michael Murphy, and Murphy caught that ball early on against him, that he's been remoulded into a full forward and hit 120 in the first 20 minutes before having to go off injured. So that's an interesting story there. Westport worth watching. And then just a quick little point on the Nail, who were against Belmullet. So the Nail won in their first ever senior championship game last weekend, and that 8 years ago they won their first junior and then won intermediate last year for the first time. So fair play to them. Paul, Cian Mackey, he's gone to Mullinachta this year, and Colmkill are against Mullinachta this weekend. The same Colmkill who actually ended Mullinachta's 4-in-a-row dream last year, the same Colmkill that beat county champions Kilo last week. But Cian Mackey going down to Mullinachta, what sort of a player are they getting, especially at club level, and you've already got a very strong team that had previously done a 3-in-a-row?
Yeah, last year we did a thing in the paper about the best Cavan players of the last 20 years, basically of the new millennium, and Cian Mackey was top, just off Martin Riley and that. And you know, I always said about Mackey when he was playing with Cavan that he wouldn't be appreciated until he was gone, because everyone sees the pace of him and the way he can beat defenders, but his passing and his vision are absolutely incredible. Top drawer. His acceleration is elite, and he also has a huge boot on him. He can kick points from long range. He doesn't have the pace he had. He's 33 now, and he's excuse me, he's playing senior inter-county football for Cavan since he was actually still a minor. But his pass and the way he can unlock defences with this attacking mark, you know, Mackey is made for Mackey, because he can put the ball right into anyone's chest, 50-60 metres, not a problem. So they're getting a hell of a player there. I still think Mullinachta are probably the best team in Longford, even though the standard is quite strong in Longford across the board. But they got caught last year, and that's probably always going to happen after the. It's very hard to get back up for it again after that. Sort of never to be forgotten the year before. But yeah, look, this Colmkill game is going to be a big one, because Colmkill have a lot of good quality as well. You've got the McKiernan up front, you've got Hawkins, the free taker, loads of good quality operators there as well. Another interesting thing is that Finbar O'Reilly, who used to play for Cavan, he was a free taker and a really good player with Cavan. He's over Mullinachta, and he had a lot of success in Cavan at schools level with St. Pat's as well. So Mullinachta will be well prepared. 2 Cavan men in a row over them.
And it's actually 4 groups of 3 in Longford, and the top 2 go through. And Rathcline, who were relegated last year but kept up because of the whole rejig with COVID, they're in the group. Both of these teams are very, very likely to get through, and Mullinachta have a couple of suspensions because of afters from this particular fixture last year. James McGivney and Gary Rogers will be out, so there's a fair chance Colmkill, after beating Kilo last week, they'll feel like they're in the right spot to win this. Now, we've mentioned Cian Mackey again up in Cavan, Castlerahan against Lacan. So how will that impact Cavan, Cian Mackey not being around?
Yeah, Castlerahan, if it's possible to come under the radar after winning, they won the league and championship double 2 years in a row, but they actually have come completely under the radar this year, mainly because of all the players they've lost. So obviously Mackey left, their goalkeeper retired, Jamie Leahy, and he was there through all their 5 county final appearances, or 6 actually, go back to 2011. Rona Flanagan retired. Paul Smith, who was outstanding player of the year in Cavan once or twice, half back, he had to step away due to work commitments. Brian Ennis, who was I think he was a Sigerson winner originally from Meath, he was gone, and there was talk that Sean Brady had retired. So Castlerahan went from probably favourites or close to odds on favourites to win the championship. They're actually quoted at 6-1, which is incredible for a team that's been in 5 finals in a row. But last night the rumours went around the players were coming back, and sure enough, last night I was at their match, which was delayed due to a COVID scare in Shercock. That's why it was played last night. And Rona Flanagan came on, Paul Smith came on, and Castlerahan ran away with it. They won it by 12 or 13 points. So they're going to be strong. Lacken were coming on really well. That man Finbar O'Reilly, who I mentioned, that's his home club. He was doing a good job with them. They would have had a couple of Cardi players. Ray McGalligan, the Cavan goalkeeper, plays full forward for them. He's absolutely a magician. His ball striking is out of this world for Lacken even still. But they seem to be on a little bit of a decline at the minute. So Casran are definitely going to be favourites to win that. I'd say if Lacken were to win it, Lacken were well beaten by Kingscourt last weekend, so if they were to win that, it'd be a massive upset.
And there's a couple other games going on. Well, there's plenty of games going on in Cavan. Is there anything else that particularly stands out to you?
Yeah, well, Cavan Gaels and Mullahoran is a very interesting game because obviously traditionally two of the heavyweights of Cavan football, but it's a sort of a changed reality now. Mullahoran went down to intermediate and won the intermediate championship at the first time of asking. The year they went down, they didn't win a game all year in league or championship. Won the intermediate championship, got the Ulster final. Possibly should have won the Ulster final, I would say, against the Belfast team who went on to the All-Ireland final. Came back up, and last year had another disastrous year and only stayed up in a relegation playoff. A lot of the older fellas who've been there a long time have moved on, and they went out with a young team with an average age of just under 23 last weekend. Played the intermediate winners last year for Lara and just blew them out of the water. Unbelievable performance. Won it by 15 points. They're going in against Cavan Gaels, who are everyone's favourites almost in Cavan. Everyone has been talking Cavan Gaels up because Gerald McKiernan has arrived in the off-season from Swanland Bar, who's just a massive signing for them. Robert Maloney Durham, who would have played with the Cavan senior team maybe 7 or 8 years ago under Brad Andrews. He had been away in America. He's home, and so that's a sort of a new look midfield partnership for them. But they did okay in the league. There was 2 rounds of the league played, but I wouldn't read too much into that. But last weekend they played Killigary and won it by a point, and they were lucky enough to hang on at the end. So there might be a few question marks with the Gaels. They're going to be hot favourites. I haven't seen any betting on it. They're going to be 3 or 4 to 1 on to beat a young Mullahoran team. But it'll be very interesting. If Mullahoran can somehow win this game, all bets are off in Cavan because it'll shake it up. But it's going to be, I still think the Gaels just should have too much experience for them.
Yeah, just curious, Phil, what you think. Like, I mean, Grove McKiernan changing club within the county, and it's even something Donegal has done in Mayo as well in the recent past. It generally doesn't go down well, does it?
No, it's a tricky one. Like Paul probably knows the background to it, but it's very tricky. Like obviously lads with ambition, all that, looking to maybe to try and win something. But sure, this year I remember a long time ago when Paul Curran made his famous transfer in Dublin, the Davises, didn't he? And like sure, the ramifications that went on for years. So look, it's different. I guess someone coming into a club like that can make a huge difference. And again, is it if he's exactly what the club needs? Sure. Well, then the club could be on a huge one. So I don't know, Paul, the background to that, but like it can be a tricky one. And like Shane mentioned the Donegal one, which generated plenty of publicity in Mayo.
Yeah, how did it go down, Paul?
Sorry, Shane.
How did that go down, that transfer?
Well, I think Swanland Bar wished him well. I think there was a breakdown in the relationship there with his home club. They were relegated to junior last year. He would have played in a junior All-Ireland final back in 2010 with Swanland Bar, which is unheard of for a team like Swanland Bar. Really small club, and they played St Mary's Carsiveen, which was, again, the club format seems to suit these Kerry clubs. Like I remember thinking at the time, if that Carsiveen team were in Cavan, they'd give the senior championship a good rattle, like they had Brian Sheehan and fellas like that. But Gerald would have played on that, and over the years didn't have any success. So he was living in Butler's Bridge, which qualified him to play for 4 or 5 teams around the Cavan parish area, and there was just a massive scramble. It was like something you'd see in a transfer window. And there was rumours of people calling out to him and contacting him and begging him to play for them. But he went to Cavan Gaels, and there is a history of players going to Cavan Gaels, the preeminent club in the county town. They would have picked up Anthony Ford from a junior club. Mickey Ling went from Crushlaw. Well, he was still minor at the time. He went to them, and they would have won multiple senior championships. Even back in the day, they would have got the likes of Jim McDonald and Dermot Dalton. So there's a tradition of that. Pat Holmes as well from Mayo played for him for a while. So that I think Gerald McKiernan, he's 30 this year, hasn't won anything at club level since that junior championship 10 years ago. So I don't think anyone would begrudge him a senior championship, because he's one of these players that turns out week after week for Cavan all the time, year on year, and probably maybe felt his career is getting away from him a wee bit.
Phil, I know you have to head away in a second, but just before you drop off the call there yourself, what are your thoughts on how county championships could actually be decided by COVID-19 cases? That, you know, the week before, the day before a big knockout game, whether it's a final, semi-final, whatever, that a team will have to say, well, do you know what, we have some cases in the club, we can't fulfil the fixture, and then maybe inter-county is starting the following week, so when do you actually play it?
Look, I would say if you take the pattern of what's happened in the last month, you'd probably say nothing short than some sort of championship's going to be decided, whether it's junior, intermediate, senior. And you look at the cases, because there is no really, the timescale is such that there is no room for replays, or to kind of accommodate a club in a way if they feel that they need to shut down and go through the testing, unless it's accelerated really fast. And again, I think we were talking to David Brady last week, and he basically said, you know, the same happened at Intercounty, that the All-Ireland in some way, shape or form could easily be decided if the counties take the route. He felt that if a player tests positive, their county, you know, out of safety, health and safety of his teammates, everything else, that they should effectively pull out. So I would have thought, if the pattern continues, and hopefully, obviously, the cases and the level of transmission in the community reduces, but we're just seeing today, Ballinabrakey, isn't it, in Meath, another case. So they played the other night, a player has tested positive since, after work colleague tested positive. So if the next round, like clearly if they were out the next night or the next weekend, as the championship is happening now, one match after the other, that's clearly, you think that team is gone, unless, I don't know how do the county boards find the dates or find the room that clearly it doesn't seem to be there in the calendar. So maybe they'll give clubs a bit of extra grace and do everything they can possible. But you're looking at, I would have thought, almost surely some impact on the club championship.
Absolutely. Brilliant, Phil. Thanks very much. I suppose you just drop off the call there. I'll chat to you again soon.
Great stuff.
Paul, your own thoughts. Do you see this definitely being a situation whereby a county championship is decided because of this?
Yeah, I didn't all along. I was a little bit sceptical. I kind of had the hunch that it would sort of burn itself out. But seeing here in Cavan, we had 2 games called off or postponed due to COVID cases last weekend, and we only had 13 games. So 2 out of 13 is a good chunk. They were both played all right last night. But yeah, look, it's going to be difficult. What does the club do? I know Mackey had a very interesting piece where he was saying that GAA clubs don't necessarily have to shut down all activity if one member of the club or one player or one of the team maybe has symptoms, and there's a lot to be said for that too. But again, you have to err on the side of caution, and you're going to get people who are going to bend the rules as well. If you're going into a county final, Shane, with Coola Hoarders and Conor Callahan has got a hamstring injury, you know, could you turn around and say, I'm not saying you would do this, but you know, as an example, could you turn around and say, well, he always got a sore throat? What do you do? The game is the game going to be postponed? You're going to get managers that are going to bend the rules to suit them as well. So look, it's a very, very tricky situation that the GAA find themselves in.
Yeah, and then just to jump on to a couple of the other games that are coming on this weekend, one that stood out to me in Donegal was St. Eunan's against Kilcar. Probably 2 teams who felt they should have won more by now.
Yeah, and again, another very interesting game. I suppose one of the interesting stories from it is Michael Hegarty still playing for Kilcar, 42 years of age. Rec Cavan, I remember in a few games back about, seems like 30 years ago now, but he's still going strong for Kilcar. And like some of those players on the Kilcar team are household names. Obviously, you've got 3 McHughes there. Owen is injured at the minute, but you've Ryan and Mark McHugh playing. You've got the 2 McBreartys playing. Like their first 15 is extremely strong. But the perception would be that they don't have the same strength and depth as units, whereas units have serious strength and depth. They have huge numbers in their club, and they've done well at underage level. You've got young lads like Niall O'Donnell and Conor O'Donnell, outstanding young players. So that's a really, really interesting game. Like, I would imagine Kilcar are going to try and mine as much as they can out of this generation. It's a small area, and this is a golden generation that they have at the minute. They had a great team when Martin McHugh was playing back in the 80s, but you know, the wheel has come around for them again. So they won one championship, but they're going to be looking to win a couple more. Whereas Unions, traditionally, they're always thereabouts in Donegal.
Yeah, like it seems to me that Kilcar with the McBreartys and with the McHughes and that they should be the sort of team that, more so than Guidor, should actually have the capability of winning All Ireland. And Guidor obviously got to an All Ireland semi-final and pushed Corofin very close.
The problem is probably their panel. If they had their first 15 all fit, I think they're a match for anyone. Literally a match for almost anyone in the country, certainly in Ulster. But I don't know if they've just got the strength and depth to go through a whole campaign over a winter. It takes its toll on you. Unions, they beat Bundoran the last day. Bundoran would be a strong team for any quarter-finalist, semi-finalist. Beat them by 7 points. Kilcar won by a cricket score against Terman, who wouldn't be that strong. So look, that one's going to be 50-50. I remember talking to some of the Donegal lads in the press box last year at the Ulster Club game between Castlerahan and Glenties, and some of them were making the case that Glenties, like as a Cavan man, I was gutted to see Castlerahan losing because they had a 3-week build up and Glenties had been on that odyssey, and then we were seeing all the videos going around of all the lads celebrating, and this was running right up until a couple of days before the game. So it was prime conditions for a Castlerahan win, but Glenties won it with a bit to spare on the day, which was depressing for Cavan supporters. But what was more depressing was some of the Donegal fellas were saying Glenties aren't necessarily the best team in Donegal. You've got Guidor there, you've got Unions, you've got Glenties, you've got St Michael's coming up strong after them, you've got Bundoran as well, and then there's a gap then after that. But there are 6 or 7 teams that are phenomenal in Donegal.
Yeah, some really good players in that Killybegs team that are coming up against Guidor this weekend, like Hugh McFadden and of course Owen Baughan Gallagher. Yeah, that's serious quality in there, and everyone knows Guidor at this stage getting to an All Ireland semi-final. That should be a good game, but Guidor to probably nudge them out.
I'd imagine so. To be honest, I wouldn't be overly familiar with them, but with the Killybegs team, only to say that Owen Baughan Gallagher, I think myself and Declan Bogue claimed to have discovered him because we used to talk about him on podcasts a few years ago, even though he was already on the Donegal team. But he's brilliant. I think he's an absolutely brilliant footballer, brilliant athlete as well. But Guidor, they're a special place. Speaking of Bogue, he wrote a brilliant piece with Kevin Cassidy, and it summed up, the huge sign that they have up in the parish about how they breed defiance, and I love that stuff. They put the hair standing in the back of your neck. It's a special place, Guidor.
Absolutely. I was very interested in what's going on in Armagh because it's straight knockout there, and I wonder how well that's going down. And then Crossmaglen, they've got a big local derby against Silverbridge this weekend, but Crossmaglen last week in the league lost to Ballymacnab at home by 7-9 to 7 points. That's quite incredible.
Yeah. Amazing, yeah. Well, though, to be fair, Cross we're missing a lot. I think we're missing Aaron McKiernan and James Morgan, fellas like that, who defenders in particular. But yeah, look, it's a change landscape down there. I still think Cross and Glen are the team to beat in Armagh, but Silverbridge are coming up. They were in an Ulster Minor Club final a few years ago, and there were a lot of those lads coming through. Ronan Clark was over them. He was over Cavan Gales last year and didn't go well at all. They parted company in the middle of the season. Seemingly he's got Silverbridge in phenomenal shape. They're extremely fit, and they won't fear that one. Cross have lost a couple of players. I think Stephen Finnegan, Paul McKiernan as well. They're missing out, but they still have huge experience. You'd imagine that run has to end at some stage. That the Cross are going to go back to the pack, but they just seem to keep on churning out these teams. And it reminds me of a Tyrone man once told me when Tyrone were winning all the Ulster Minor and under 21 titles at one stage. A Tyrone fella said to me, in all honesty, he says a lot of those teams that won those titles weren't that good. He said it's just they were average teams, but they were Tyrone, and it added a couple of inches to them when they went out, and it took a couple of inches off the opposition. And I'd say it's a mindset thing up there with teams that they just can't get over the mental hurdle of beating Crossmaglen.
So I'm hearing Stephen Kernan is over Crossmaglen, and by the looks of it, they're looking to play man for man, but there was sort of 40 yards in front of their fullback last week, and Jack Grugan, Rory's brother, scored 4 goals, I think, in the first half only. So, are they leaving themselves very open?
Yeah, well, it sounds like it. Yeah, well, Joe Brawley is always talking about how Crossmaglen love to play that sort of attacking game. I don't think it's to the degree that Joe makes that to be, but look, I think in the modern game, it's difficult to do that. The game has gone back to a more attacking style in the last few years. It's opened up a bit, but you still need to put the clampers on at the back. I think there could be asked for trouble there against Silverbridge if they do that.
Yeah, Ballymacnab probably fancy to beat Madden.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know too much about that one.
Yeah, and don't know about it. I don't know a whole pile myself. Derry then. Well, actually, to be honest, like Schlockneil, they're generally cruising through Derry. Well, not always cruising through it, but they're against Coleraine this weekend. Magherafelt are against Glen. Magherafelt had that win last year, wasn't it? The first one in 40 odd years, I believe.
Yeah. Like that Derry Championship is phenomenal. Like the Derry Championship is arguably the best club championship in the country, and like even the hurling championship up there is quite good. Like Coleraine did well in the hurling recently, and there's no tradition of hurling there, and they've done so well in football in the last few years that you'd wonder. I saw Carol Kane tweeting about that, if they had to focus a little bit more on hurling, what they could have achieved. The Derry Championship is absolutely phenomenal. Like, I suppose there's a lot of people waiting for this Glen team, the Waddy Grahams, to come through, because they won 3 or 4 Ulster minor clubs. And I've been up in Belfast for those competitions around Christmas, and the finals usually around New Year's Day, and it's a serious standard of football. A huge crowd goes into St Paul's for those games. It's a real crucible, and Waddy Grahams came through that. Now, obviously they lost Conor Glass, but like they should still be coming on again. Schlockneil, thereabouts again. Like their whole odyssey has been well documented. So like the Derry Championship, I think someone is.
So we just got cut off there, Paul. But just to finish off, you were just talking about the competitiveness of the Derry Championship.
Yeah, well, as I was saying, like it's someone needs to go up to Derry and do a documentary on it. See, I think it would be, seriously, I think that would be absolutely brilliant, because knowing some of those people involved in football in Derry, like if you've ever heard Tony Scullion talk or any of those lads, there's some passion up there. Like, it's phenomenal. You'd know the Schlockneil hurling people as well. Like, it's an amazing place, and when you look at the competitiveness, the passion that's around those parishes, particularly in that heartland in South Derry, it's absolutely phenomenal. And you see the numbers they get to matches in Owenbeg in particular. I've been up to Owenbeg, and it's a lovely, compact little ground, and I sometimes compare it to the likes of Breffni Park or even Clonus for a club championship game. If you put 5,000 in there, and that's a big crowd for a club championship game, you might only get that for a final, and it's kind of lost in there. But in Owenbeg, they were getting 8, 9, 10,000 into a 8, 9, 10,000 capacity arena. It's an absolute coliseum. So I think the Derry Championship, I hopefully I'm going to get up there sometime and watch some games, because I believe it's phenomenal.
And just a quick word then on handball, because obviously you're a massive handball man. What's the lay of the land with handball at the moment?
Yeah, well, I'll give you a bit of an exclusive on that, Shane. Unfortunately, most of the grades have been culled now, because the problem in handball has been that clubs are just unwilling to open their facilities to host games, and there's just a lot of fear out there, a lot of reluctance to host games. I think only 15% of clubs said they would host championship games. So at the moment, the National Handball Centre is nearly completed, but traditionally what happens in handball is games will be hosted around the country by clubs up until the semi-final stage, and then you move to Croke Park for that. So clubs just aren't confident doing it. Kilkenny would be a huge handball county, and clubs in Kilkenny, or the Kilkenny County Board, said that they spoke to their clubs and that they're not confident opening their facilities and officiating that game. So like, what would be required of club officials would be to referee games, or to do the gate there and things like that, and they're just not confident doing that. It's an indoor sport, I suppose, and I think you're 18 times more likely or 19 times more likely to contract COVID-19 indoors. So GAA Handball did work closely with that COVID advisory group. I know Fergal McGill and the GAA helped them out a lot on that, and they did put in place a protocol. Now, I'll be honest with you, there was a lot of complaints within the handball community. They felt that we were kind of being not sold out, but kind of been the forgotten part of the GAA family, and that we were an afterthought. I've heard these opinions expressed to me, and I put it to the national handball manager John Kelly myself, but when he explained it to me, he made the case very well. He was saying nobody wants to see the games back more than we want to see them back, and there was still some skepticism, but once the club said that they wouldn't host games, I think the handball have a CCCC as well, and their hands were tied on it. So what's happening now is we're going to have a senior championship, singles only, in men's and women's. We're going to have a minor championship, and then we're going to have the juvenile grades, and everything else is gone. So the senior championships are sacrosanct. They've been going since the 1920s. The ladies in particular is is been really good in the last couple of years, with Martina McMahon and Katrina Casey making most of those finals. In the men's grade, Owen Kennedy won the title again last year at 40 years of age, and there's a few up and coming lads that were going to make that championship more interesting, because the men's senior singles have been dominated by Kennedy and Robbie McCarthy for a decade now. The minor singles is going to be really interesting, because you've got Billy Drennan. I think I was telling you about him before. He's a phenomenal young hurler from Kilkenny, from Galmoy is his club, if that rings a bell. But he's an incredible young handballer. He's in it. You've got Owen McGinnity as well from Monaghan. So we've established something, but from the wreckage. But handball has been hit the worst, without a doubt, of all the GAA codes, because it's an indoor game. So it's just unfortunate. And like when the lockdown came in, in handball we have two codes. We've got 40 by 20 and 60 by 30. They're the two main codes. And when the lockdown came in, we were 1 week away from the festival of handball. 1,000 people go through the doors in Kingscourt that weekend. And like I often tell people who'll be sort of sniggering at handball, or be winding me up, saying it's and it is a small sport. It's a small community. But I often say you should go to Kingscourt and witness this festival weekend. You have 1,000 people coming through the doors. You have people from every county in Ireland, and the standard of play there is phenomenal as well. So we were a week out from that, and the sponsor for that championship was O'Neill's. It was the big event where O'Neill's got a bit of publicity out of it as well. So the timing of that was just absolutely disastrous. But they are hoping to go back now and finish those finals. There's certain grades that were down to finals. They're hoping maybe in December to get those 40-20 finals finished. I know there's a couple of juvenile players in Cavan that I help out coaching with a wee bit, and like I know how disappointed they are to get to an All-Ireland final. You just imagine that if you're 15 or 16 and you train really hard to get to an All-Ireland final and see it pulled away from you, it's tough. It's very tough for a sport like handball, because you're already competing against every other sport and fighting a losing battle, to be honest, against other sports, because it's just the whole buzz and hype around football and hurling and rugby and everything else. It's hard to compete with that. So I think the GAA handball have done the right thing to prioritise juveniles and those sacrosanct senior grades, but other than that, it's going to be a pretty barren year for the handballers.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I suppose in a lot of walks of life, people are trying to find ways of making things work. Was there much talk of maybe hosting these outdoors? Is it possible? Is there enough facilities outdoor?
Yeah, no, not really. You can play certain types of handball outdoors. One ball handball can be played outdoors. Like traditionally, obviously, it was an outdoor game, but no, you couldn't with the weather and everything else. You couldn't look about playing a senior championship outdoors. Now they might look and play some one ball tournaments. I know there have been some local tournaments outdoors. And I wrote a column about this recently, how there should be a push in handball circles to revive some of the old outdoor courts, because I don't want to start. I'll keep you here for another hour if I start talking about this. But in handball's heyday, it was an outdoor game, and those courts, which you'd be familiar with all around the country, they were basically a billboard. It was like having a huge big neon billboard when you had people queuing up to play the game in the middle of a village where there mightn't be much else going on. That was when handball was at its absolute height, and because of the climate, we had to move indoors. But the price of progress was that the game became hidden away, and I sometimes liken it to a secret society. So yeah, I do think that there needs to be a bit of a push to play more outdoor handball, even on a recreational level. But in terms of competitive senior handball, I think it's just with the vagaries of the climate, I think it'd be too difficult.
Great stuff, Paul. Really appreciate you joining me, and I'm sure we'll chat again soon.
Thanks.